Hi everyone. Here we are in Chapter 7, and actually Chapter 6 was an excellent segue into Chapter 7, which is Strategic Planning and Change Leadership. And really, strategic planning is the foundation for making sure that the organization is moving forward in a positive trajectory that is consistent with those guiding factors that we have within organizations. And when I'm saying guiding factors, I'm meaning the mission, vision, and values. And again, taking a step back, it's very important that the mission, vision, and values be the driving factors for everything even that we talked about in the last chapter as far as decision making and how to position the organization to move forward. So always, always, always keep that in mind, how critical the mission, vision, and values statements are, and that we need to live those statements within our organization so that we are truly authentic to those guideposts that we have established for the organization, and not allowing other factors to overshadow what we're really there for. And that's such a critical piece to understand and to live. So with that being said, as being a leader within an organization, it's important to know how you fit within the strategic plan, what your role is for strategic planning. And you may not have a direct role in the overall organizational strategic plan. However, it's important to know what that strategic plan is and what your role is to help the organization to move forward to the goals and objectives of the organization. And your particular strategic plan within your area of practice needs to be consistent with the organizational strategic plan as well. So everyone's moving in the same direction. It has to be those pieces that are your role as you're moving forward are those pieces that need to be in place for the strategic plan to come into fruition. So always keep in mind that the strategic plan is not something outside your realm, that you need to be very aware of what the strategic plan and consider the strategic plan as part of your everyday decision-making process. And sometimes we forget that, and sometimes strategic plans are put on a shelf and not really re-examined, and that's not a productive way to use strategic planning. So always know what your locus of control is, and always know what those factors that you have in your realm that can help the organization move forward to those organizational goals. So again, it's really important to keep all that you serve in the know as far as strategic planning, so they know what direction, again, that where the organization is going. And sometimes some of the most complicated factors and disconnects occur when the staff really don't know why they're doing what they're doing. And that's such a crucial piece as your leadership role is communication. Communication, relationships, and trust. Just very foundational in what you do each and every day. So keep that in mind. And also make sure that you're not only developing within your area of practice what goals and objectives you plan to move forward with, but also do that reevaluation process. And sometimes things don't always go as we plan, so it's important to be able to reset and recharge and move forward when something doesn't work right, and expect that things won't work right. That's just the way things go, and that's how sometimes we come to even more positive solutions is when we run into some roadblocks or some snafus or bumps in the road. So keep that in mind. Again, I want to emphasize how important it is to, no matter what you're doing, to keep the organizational mission, vision, and values in context when you're making decisions, as you're dealing with the folks that you serve. Always, always, always keep the mission, vision, and values in mind, and walk the walk and talk the talk. So it's not just good enough to talk the talk. Our actions must reflect the mission, vision, and values of the organization that we serve. And just a very brutal honesty here, if your particular values don't tick and tie with your organizational mission, vision, and values, it's important to take some real deep introspection and think about whether you really need to be there or not. And it's important as a leader to really have that authentic connection with your organization. So I digress a little bit, but just kind of keep that in mind. As we're looking at strategic planning, it's really important that we actually examine our objectives. And I challenge you to think of objectives not just in terms of nursing practice, but think about how everything fits together, much like we talked about in Chapter 6, the complex adaptive system, how complex healthcare truly is, and that our particular objectives, maybe within nursing, impacts other factors within the organization as well. So always keep that in mind, how integrative and collaborative we need to think when we're developing how we're going to move forward within the organization. So again, tying back to Chapter 6, think about how we need to think about population health as well when we're looking at overhauling healthcare in general and changing the way healthcare delivery actually occurs. So we need to think about population health as we're developing those objectives. And sometimes we're very focused on our particular area of practice, whether it would be acute care, public health, home care, those types of things. We need to think how our practice impacts the folks that we serve. So keep that in mind. And also, another thing to keep in mind is the organizational culture and how that dictates whether or not particular strategies will come to fruition, and whether a plan can actually be realized. In that culture, again, as we talked about earlier, we need to create that culture that embraces improvement and moving forward and positive innovation, because we need to think about strategic planning not only in the here and now and what's occurring right now, but organizations need to position themselves within the realm of healthcare for their future viability, and for providing effective care to those that they serve. So just in taking kind of an analogy, a very simplistic one at that, consider like a grade school basketball team. Their goal is to maybe get to state. And so that would be part of what would be considered their strategic plan, is getting to state. And part of what they need to do is figure out how to get there. So they need to develop what their strategy is going to be in order to get there. And sometimes their strategy needs to change along the way, because the teams that they may be encountering may be different. So one may be, the strategy may be using man-to-man, and during that game, the coverage of man-to-man coverage may not be working. So they regroup, they huddle, they talk about it, and maybe they shift to a zone. So the same thing occurs in healthcare. When things aren't quite working, we know what our ultimate goal is, but we need to regroup. We need to maybe change our position. We don't need to waste our energies in moving forward, and this happens quite often, in moving forward in the same way if we're not getting the results that we need. So again, as we're looking at strategic planning, typically there are 3 to 5 overarching goals in a strategic plan, and how we're going to get there may change a little bit along the way, and that's part of being part of a complex adaptive system. And again, going back to chapter 6, that we need to regroup and revise and really do an iterative process, and that means ever changing. So we make a little change, not working quite right, we want to shift it again. So it's much like your leadership practice as well. You don't use the same communication skills with each and every person that you work with, because each and every person is a little different. So the same holds true, just translated to a bigger focus, is that you shift and you change and you adapt as you move forward, but you still keep those overarching goals in mind. So I hope that makes sense a little bit, but really take a deep dive in this chapter. It's very important to understand not only the organizational strategic plan, but again, and ticking back to chapter 6, looking at the influencers outside of the organization and how the system needs to be very adaptive to accommodate for the changes without sacrificing the mission, vision, and values of the organization. So with that being said, let me know if you have any questions or if you want to have a discussion about this particular concept. If it's a little muddy to you, I'm more than willing to do so, and I would encourage you to do so. Thank you so much, and take care now.